And we are live. If you're watching this on the replay, you can fast forward about 15 minutes and we get started. This is currently the pre-show where I try to get my act together and let everybody know that we are doing this. It is right now. And send people to the live page. Isn't this exciting, this pre-show part? Let's save that. Empty that. And do I indeed have this all buffered up to send an announcement? It's like we have sent all your updates for today. I guess I have not. So let's share. iLive Network Plus study group starts right now. Don't miss all the fun. That would be at this URL, if I can spell my name. And let's schedule that to go out at 5 minutes till. That looks good. Okay. Forgot about that. I have a list, of course. There's a big list of things, and I go through the list, and for some reason didn't do that. Go figure. There we go. Powered up. How's this doing? Hello, chat room. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll notice there's no chat there. So you'll need to go to professormesser.com/live and you can watch the live stream and participate in the chat. We've got about 13, 12 minutes until we get started. I'm just getting things going here. Got new lighting. Oh, let's try camera, shall we? So camera 1. I don't know if I need to bring down that camera or not. I think it's okay for now. It's okay because it's just outside me hitting my head on it. Camera 2. Can't really see the lights there though, can you? Not really. Camera 3. Oh, well, yeah. I guess we do need a camera 3. That's no good. This is why you do these things. Ta-da. Let's fix this. Bloop. Woo. Now it's in a resolution that camera 3 will work. How nice. And camera 4 is this. And me with the phone number. And talking head and talking head. All right. That's all good. All right. It's all working. Streaming's working. Online stuff is working. We have a hot beverage. We have already taken our vocal zones. I guess we could do an audio check just to make sure. Test 2, 3, 4, 5. Test 2, test 3, test 4, test 5. Of course, I'm not even going to hear that. I don't know why I'm saying that way. Let's turn this down. See, just hear me making noises. All right. It's all working. Streaming's working. Okay. That sounds fine. My quality assurance check is now complete. We'll get started in 10 minutes. 10 minutes, Mr. Sinatra. There is a lot of work I did in the studio over the last 2 weeks to get lighting all changed around. So, of course, it looks absolutely the same to you. And everything looks exactly the way it used to be. There's no difference here whatsoever. But the lights, instead of being on stands, are hanging from my ceiling. So for me, I have so much more room now. My studio just got twice as big because I got everything off the floor. It's been so awesome. So I feel better about it, even though you have the same feeling. Nothing changed for you. It's all different for me. There is plenty of networking questions today. I had to take my car in for service, and I sat there in the waiting room with their really bad internet access and just wrote questions. They had a Sonic Wall URL filter, and everything I wanted to get to was filtered. Well, not everything. The big stuff. You could get to YouTube. You could get to Reddit. I was trying to get to certain sites for downloading utilities to run on my machine so I can make things a little easier. Nope, blocked. And I ended up just clicking my phone into tether mode and doing that. I've got plenty of things to talk about. Do I have all of this in order? I got all of these things ready to go. I think I do. I got that. Yep. Do I have this? Yep, I got that. Do I have another thing? Sure. Should probably get one of my cases. Let's see. Okay. All right. Let's put this in the right place. How much battery is left on this? 18%. That's good planning right there. All right. That's charged. Charging. Oh, you know what? I need to turn off this back here. Let me do this. Okay, no more annoying lights in my background, which you can't see in this view, but I can see in mine because I can see this view. That's better. Okay. It's the little things. Yes, I do like to wear shorts. You're lucky I'm wearing pants at all, really. It's one nice thing about working in a studio in your house. Just ignore all those things. Yes, and when people see me, they naturally think of John Cena. Sure, of course. It's a natural thing going on there. Well, I'm going to start a local recording here and a local recording here. All right, we got 2 recordings going. Oh, there they are. Someone's just asking about the Cylons. There they are. All right. Okay. Oh, just got the tweet, just got the Facebook, just got the Google Plus. 5 minutes. We're going to do something here. So, the Rubik's Cube is charged. That's what I was charging. That was the light that was on behind me. It was that darn Rubik's Cube. Now the light's off. Yes, the little rotating red light is the recording light. So I know it's recording. If it was just sitting there dark, it would be ready. When you plug it in and originally it initializes, it's green. So, if you walk up to it, do not pull out that SSD because there is a big spinning ring of red around it, which is pretty good, actually. That's pretty good feedback for this. Okay. I'm ready for some interesting topics too. Hopefully someone has some. That would be great. We had interesting topics. Okay. A few minutes and we'll get things going. Top of the hour for me is about 30 seconds ahead of you. So I'll probably be starting at 30 seconds before noon for you. But for me, it really is noon. Oh dear, my mouse has come loose. I usually don't have this big control panel in front of me. That's usually removed when I'm not doing a study group. And my mouse is not happy about that. Now he's happy. All right, everybody. I think we're just about ready to get started. A lot of you are already in Socrative. You're already trained now. You already go in, load up Socrative, go to the Professor Messer room, and do all of that. Now, the first check was done before I turned on the stream. This was the second check. Weather's nice right now. Weather is, what is the weather? So right now, the temperature is, where's me right now? 88 degrees Fahrenheit. It looks like sunny all day until 4 o'clock. There's a 30% chance of rain. High of 91, it looks like. A bit warm out. Okay. I think it's about time we can get something going here. Recordings are going, streaming is going, it's holding that, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now I have to say stuff. Let's see if all this stuff's going to work, shall we? Because really, ultimately, that's going to be the important part. Yeah, some of you are in Socrative already. You guys are doing well with this. All right, well, let's do this thing, and we'll get this show on a road. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the June 2015 Professor Messer Network Plus Study Group. This is a monthly study group where I ask you questions and you try to figure out the answer. And we all do it online. We all participate. We can see what other people are answering, not individually. I don't want to point anybody's name out, but we'll certainly see a roll-up of what everybody is doing with the questions that I'm asking. It'll be interesting to see how many of these you can get right. This is something we do every month. I want to thank everybody for attending. We had a 15-minute pre-show here where everybody's getting into the chat room. So if you are watching this live or you would like to attend live, there's a chat available on professormesser.com/live. If you're watching this on YouTube, which is how we stream this, you may want to pop over to the Professor Messer website, professormesser/live, to be able to see the video and chat at the same time. And we can do those things. I want to thank everybody for supporting what I do here throughout the month. This is able to, I'm able to create new videos and keep a lot of new content added to the site thanks to your support. If you want to take, of course, one of my videos, all of my videos are available to watch online for absolutely free. But some of you have been nice enough to purchase offline versions of my videos. Here's an offline course where I send you a flash drive that's got all of my courses in there. Nice. It's a little hot there, a little bright. But all of my course materials can be also watched offline as well. You can learn more about that at professormesser.com/getnetplus. Of course, I always have something going on Twitter and Facebook and Google+. You can go to professormesser.com/Twitter/Facebook/something, and you will get there. You can also see all of my videos on YouTube. That's the primary spot where I put all of my videos. We're well over 1,100 videos on YouTube at this point. And of course, let me remind you that before you take your exam, don't pay full price for your voucher. You can get a discount code at professormesser.com/vouchers. Now, as I mentioned, I have that offline version. If you're interested in that, not only includes the videos, it includes MP3 audio. All my course notes are included with this, my extremely popular course notes that a lot of people will buy themselves. We'll talk about more about my course notes later on in the study group. They're also now included with the offline version of my course. That may be something you might want to look into. There is also, as I mentioned, live Q&A today. So if you are online and you would like to participate live, of course, this can only be done live. If you're watching the replay, there's not much reason to go through this process, but I use a service called Socrative. So if you pop open a new window or grab your mobile device and go to Socrative.com, you simply want to choose the student login option, not the teacher login. I'm the teacher, you're the student. So go to the student login and go to the room Professor Messer. Make sure you spell the room name properly or you won't see any questions popping up. In fact, there's been a question there now for the last 30 minutes or so. So most people are already in there. When you get in there, you'll see something like this, where I'm asking a question. In fact, my first question is how long you've been studying for your Network Plus certification. And you can see people are already answering what their answers might be. There's also apps for your mobile device. So if you're running iOS, you're running Google Play, you can go to the Google Play Store for your Android devices. If you're running Chrome, there's even a Chrome app in the Chrome Web Store. And for those of you doing Windows Phone, there's also an app in the Windows Store. It's quite comprehensive for those pieces to be able to do it. So once you get there, you'll be able to answer the question, how long have you been studying for your Network Plus certification? So go to Socrative.com, student login, room name Professor Messer, and you'll be able to see this. And I'll, of course, see as you're putting in the answers, I'll be able to show you this information, less than 3 months, 3 to 6 months, 6 to 9, 9 to a year, over a year, and you already have your Network Plus certification. So those of you that, as I mentioned before, I'm those 9 months and more people. I'm one of those folks. It takes me a long time to study for a certification. And you already have your Network Plus certification. You might be watching for continuing education credits. And I'll be giving you a special word, a special code that you will send me at the end of this study group. And I will be able to provide you with a digital certificate saying that you were indeed here. There is a lot going on with the Network Plus certification right now. There's 2 different versions available. There was someone on my website this week who asked for, do I take both of these? I see there's an N10005 and an N10006. Do I take both of those to be Network Plus certified? And thankfully, no. The N10005 has been updated to the N10006. And right now, you're able to take both of them. There's a small overlap period of about 6 months where you could take either one of these and get your Network Plus certification. And obviously, CompTIA does that in case you've been studying and studying and studying, and suddenly they release a new version of the certification. You don't have to now start over again. You've got a 6-month ramp where you can take your exam and get that out of the way. Whether you take the 005 or 006, you get exactly the same certification. But the 005 now is retired on August the 31st of 2015. So only a couple of months left before that particular version of the certification goes away. Now, they're only retiring the exam itself. If you go on August 31st and you take your exam and you pass it, your certification is still good for 3 years. So the certification you get has a certain 3-year time frame regardless of what exams might be available out there in the world. The N10 006 is the latest one. This is an exam version that came out in February. So this is a brand new version effectively, since these exams really stick around about 3 years. It's pretty fresh at this point. And one of the nice things about that is I have all of the videos available on my website for all of the 005 and all of the 006. So you really can't go wrong. Pick which one. If you're starting fresh, you're ready to study right now, start with the 006. If you've been studying for quite some time and you think you can get this exam done before August the 31st, keep working on the 005 and take the 005 exam. So that should help you figure out which one of those you would like to be able to use. Well, I now have questions for you. We've done pretty well with this. I see most of us, 50% of us, have been studying for less than 3 months for your Network Plus certification. So I am going to give you now some more questions to go through. I've got about at least an hour's worth to go through, so we should have a pretty good idea of this. And on the website, by the way, not only are my 006 videos available, but all of the other pieces that you're accustomed to seeing are also available for these things as well. So let's go through and have a look at what some of these questions might be. And the first question I have for you is kind of a networking question / security question. And that question is, which of these would be the most likely way for a bad guy to break into a network protected with the WPA2? So now you have to be the bad guy, and you have to think about how would they break into a WPA2 protected network. If you think you know the answer, don't answer in the chat room. No answering in the chat room. Go to Socrative.com because I have a number of options available to you. One of these options is, are they going to cycle through all the WPS keys? Are they going to take advantage of a cryptographic vulnerability? Are they going to brute force the shared passphrase? Are they going to create a denial of service based on the frequencies in use? Or are they going to have a man-in-the-middle attack to be able to attack this network? It's going to be one of these. These are all very applicable ways to get into certain networks that have certain vulnerabilities, but only one of them applies to WPA2. And that's really the question. If you think you know, go to Socrative.com to the Professor Messer room and you can answer. And I'm peeking at what people are answering already. I don't see individual answers. I see this rolled up as to what everybody's answering. And many of you are doing pretty well with this question. Obviously, on the Network Plus exam, you have to know a lot about wired networks, wireless networks, the security components of those wired and wireless networks. And this question certainly speaks to that. I think the 006 even has a little more security than the 005 had. So you'll find that security is a big part, not just of the Network Plus, but of the A Plus as well. If you're someone who took the A Plus before, then you're probably accustomed to that and seeing those pieces. There's quite a bit there from a security perspective. And in this question, you have to know first what WPA2 is. What is that? Because once you have context, you'll be able to apply that back. And there's really only one way to really get into a WPA2 network, and it's one of these options here. Which ones is it? Is it cycle through the WPS keys, take advantage of cryptographic vulnerability, brute force, denial of service, man in the middle? Let's see how we did. Well, let's see. About half of us chose brute force the shared passphrase, but I've got a pretty good double digits in cycling through all the WPS keys, taking advantage of a cryptographic vulnerability or a man-in-the-middle attack. So almost nobody chose to create a denial of service on the frequencies that are in use, which would, I guess, be a pretty good way to mess up a network, but clearly would not allow you to break into the network piece. So what is this? How do you effectively hack WPA2? Well, the problem with WPA2's network, at least from the bad guy's perspective, is there's not a lot of options for breaking into a WPA2 network. There are no known cryptographic vulnerabilities. There's no secret backdoor way to get into a WPA2 network. In fact, there's with WPA, and you probably have seen this on your own wireless network, WPA generally uses a shared passphrase in a small environment like a home office or small office. Everybody has the same key, and the only way in is to guess that key, is to figure out and effectively brute force that key. So you would go through every possible iteration for that key, which could be very, very difficult with a 256-bit key. So this is one of the reasons we always say, use a relatively complex password that's not a common word or common phrase. Use some punctuation, use some capital letters. Make it difficult if somebody's going to go through the brute force process to be able to do that. WPA Enterprise, you may see this also listed as WPA 802.1x. That usually is taking advantage of a central server. So instead of having a shared passphrase that everyone uses, you're using your normal login credentials to get onto the wireless network. And it finally provides you with that access using this authentication mechanism called 802.1x. For that, somebody's going to need your specific authentication. So they're going to need your username and your password to gain access to that wireless network. In some ways, that might be easier than brute forcing something like a pre-shared key. That's why on many networks, I have one right here, on many networks, you have an additional authentication mechanism. So you have this extra thing you have to type in. This is my PayPal dongle. So it sends me a code, or this is a pseudo-random. It's really, the code is synchronized with the server at PayPal based on the time of day. And this is one way that you can add yet another component to the authentication, so that if somebody did have my username and password, they'd still need the code that's on this little key fob that I have right there. So if you are somebody who went through this process, went through these questions, this has nothing to do with WPS. There is a vulnerability associated with WPS. This is not it. We're talking specifically about WPA2. There's not a cryptographic vulnerability, so that was not the answer. Obviously, a denial of service is not going to get you into a network, and it's not a man-in-the-middle attack either. WPA2 has specific features in the protocol itself to prevent a man-in-the-middle attack. That means really the only way that you're going to get into a WPA2 network is to somehow guess or brute force the shared passphrase. And if you answered C, you would get that one absolutely correct. So I think we did pretty well with that one. About half of us got that right. If you didn't get it right, don't worry too much. In fact, you just learned something. So think of it as another step towards getting that Network Plus certification. Well, I have another question for you. Let's do another one since we're sort of getting started here with the pieces. Oh, before we get to the other question, people in the chat room are saying this is synchronized, is it? This key fob that I have is one. It has a special serial number on the back. I'm not going to show you the serial number because that is something that's a privileged piece of information. But a serial number that's on here has been synchronized with the clock. So that it's going to give the exact same number here as it's going to give at the PayPal headquarters. And that's how it's synchronized. If this somehow loses its battery, or for some reason, it's a very well-engineered clock that's in here, if it somehow gets out of sync, then that's a problem. What generally will happen is you'll type this in, and the server back at PayPal knows what all of the previous 10 answers could have been and what the next 10 answers could be, and it figures out where your key fob is and synchronizes it up with where you happen to be in case there's any drifting of the clock. These days, in fact, I don't even use this particular key fob anymore. These days, I use one that is built into my phone. Actually, PayPal sends an SMS message. So there is a multi multiple authentication methods available from PayPal, and they will just send you an SMS when you log in, and you can type in the number from there. That way your phone effectively replaces this key fob, and since your phone is with you all the time, at least mine is, that's an easy way to do it. And I do that for everything. I use Rackspace. Rackspace does a similar thing as well. Let's do another question, shall we? As I take a sip of a beverage here, let's do another question. And my question is, which one of these are secure protocols? Pick two of these. So I'm giving you quite a few protocols on the screen and no answering in the chat room. But there's a number of protocols I'm going to throw at you in this particular question. There are two secure protocols in this big list. Which one of these could it possibly be? So your options are SNMP version 3, TFTP, SLIP, SSH, FTP, Telnet, and HTTP. So I really threw quite a number of answers there, but I wanted you to be able to pick two of these from the mix. I didn't just want to give you one. I really wanted to test you and see if you knew which one of these would be secure protocols. And you have to now decide which through this list are secure. Now, also on the exam, you make a note here, I'm asking for two of these. This could happen on the multiple choice part of your Network Plus exam. You may be asked for that particular protocol to choose, or this particular question to choose multiple responses. And generally, when they ask for those multiple responses, they will bring up a list that shows, instead of a radio button, it'll be a checkbox. So there's a kind of a visual cue in case you missed that in the question. It will tell you that, yeah, you need to do more than one of those. In fact, if you only answer one, it will tell you, I'm asking for two particular responses here, and you only gave me one of those. So it's very, very useful to have that there. So there are, in this big list of protocols, there are two of these that are secure. So you want to go through each one of these and make a decision to decide which one of these in this entire list would be a secure protocol. I think you guys are pretty good at this one. I'm sneaking a peek at what all of these might be. I obviously can't show you percentages on this because I'm asking for two of these, but you did pretty well in this. We look and see how we did. You can see the top two on this list by far are SNMP version 3 and SSH. Very few of us chose TFTP, SLIP, FTP, Telnet, and only 1% chose HTTP. So is that really the case? Did we really choose the appropriate secure protocols in this case? The reason we call these secure and unsecure protocols is effectively, are we encrypting the data as it's going across the network? Could somebody sit on the network with a protocol analyzer with Wireshark? Could they sniff the air on your wireless network and pull in and look at the information that you're sending back and forth? There are a number of insecure protocols. SLIP would certainly be qualified as an insecure protocol, as would Telnet. Telnet is all in the clear. In browsers, HTTP is completely in the clear. If you were to look at the communication of an FTP or a TFTP file transfer, it is also in the clear. And there's also network management protocols like SNMP version 1 and SNMP version 2 that are in the clear. And so if we're going to use some secure protocols, it's not going to be one of these. In fact, it's very easy with the technologies these days. You can capture an entire FTP file transfer, grab all of the packets, run it through a process, and it will rebuild all of those files that you transferred. And now whoever was sniffing that network now has exactly the same files that you just transferred. And we don't want to have that. And that's why we want to stick with more secure protocols. Secure protocols like SNMP version 3, which added encryption to SNMP along with some authentication mechanisms. And you can verify that the information that was sent by the remote station is exactly the same as the information that you received. There's also SSH, which is sort of a encrypted version of Telnet. Instead of using in the clear Telnet, we now use Secure Shell Protocol, or SSH, to make that happen. So if you are on a Linux machine, you can simply run SSH in a terminal. If you're running on a Windows machine, you'd need an SSH client to be able to do that. So pretty useful to have those secure protocols. If you're on any network of any size, you're going to be using SSH to communicate to routers and switches and firewalls and other infrastructure devices for sure. Nobody uses Telnet. Somebody tells you to use Telnet, there's a big problem somewhere, and you do not want to do anything associated with that particular protocol. We've got more questions for you. Let's see how we do with another one of these. This one is a question I created to kind of get you thinking about some of the more performance-based questions that you might be asked on the Network Plus exam. As you know, Network Plus not only asks you for multiple choice questions, it might also have a number of questions right at the beginning that CompTIA calls performance-based questions. These might be matching, they might be fill in the blank. You might have to order things from lowest to highest or highest to lowest. So I wanted to get you thinking that way. Even though this is going to be a multiple choice question, it's one that I want you to think about what order this really should be in. So the question is, which one of these would have the slowest maximum network speed? So we want to think of all of these technologies that I'm about to show you. What is the maximum network speed for that technology? And of all of these, which one is the slowest? So you're going to want to rank these in your head when we talk about what they might be. Here's the technologies: OC12, T3, Gigabit Ethernet, ADSL, and 10BASE-T. So those are the 5 technologies I put on the screen. Now we have to figure out which one is the slowest. And one of the best ways to do this is to go through all 5 of these and figure out what the speeds are. Even if you're not exactly sure what the speed might be, you might have a good idea of what it could be close to, or what it might be higher or lower relative to another. Because in this case, I'm not asking you for the exact network speed. I'm simply asking you to tell me which one is lowest. So you can sometimes put things higher or lower just because you happen to remember what some of those might be. So this is a little bit tricky. Some of you sent me some emails throughout the month and you said, I need harder questions. So I thought, how can I give you something that would make you think? And I think this one will absolutely make you think, because now you have to know what is OC12. And all of these, by the way, are technologies that are from the Network Plus certification, both the 005 and the 006. So these aren't made up. It's not a trick question. These are real technologies that you have to know for your Network Plus certification. And if for those of you in the chat room, well, if some of these are common sense, then good. That's the way it should be. They're all, I don't think any of them are very common. So, but if you're accustomed, you already know these technologies, it might be useful as well. So this is one where knowing the nomenclature, understanding the terms that we use are going to be pretty important for these particular answers. Well, let's see how we did with this particular question. How do we do? Well, which one of these is, we're all over the place with the slowest maximum network speed. Looks like we kind of have a tie for first. Is it ADSL or is it 10BASE-T? Those two right there are neck and neck for which one might be slowest. Nobody chose Gigabit Ethernet. Nobody chose, well, 10% of you chose OC12 and 10% of you chose T3. So we're all over the place on this one. It's only going to be one of them, of course. So what I did is I created a chart for both of these. I guess I could have done a little better graphics on this chart. It's a little narrow. I could have made my graphics a little bit bigger, but I think this gets basically to the point. So let's take the OC12, T3, Gigabit Ethernet, ADSL, and 10BASE-T and stick them on a chart. And here they are. Now we have a nice view, and this is listed in megabits per second. So OC12 is 622.08 megabits per second. So not quite gig Ethernet speeds, which is probably why we don't see much OC12 in the enterprise any longer. T3 is about 45 megabits, so that's certainly a lot less than OC12. Gigabit Ethernet, since it's a gig, it's 1,000 megabits per second. That is the fastest one. If we had to choose the fastest in this list, that would win the fastest. ADSL's maximum speed in its current version is 24 megabits per second. So in this particular case, ADSL isn't even the slowest because 10BASE-T, as the name implies, is 10 megabit Ethernet. And so 10 megabit Ethernet would be the slowest network speed from this list. And you would be able to see that the 39% of you that chose 10BASE-T would be absolutely correct. So just under 40% of you got that one right. This is a little bit more of a tricky question. This is one where we have to list all of these things out and really come up with exactly what the answer might be. So we have to know these types of technologies. You're going to run into them in the enterprise. You're going to have people that will ask you to configure a network of a certain speed, and you're going to need to know that. There are, of course, a lot of network technologies to know. And if you've gone through my videos, you've probably seen a number of those. I've also taken all of this information from all of my videos and put them into a single file. It's my Network Plus course notes. You can find them on the Professor Messer website. And I've got the course notes information there on the screen for you. And I've taken all of these technologies and I put them into the course notes. I'll give you an example. So here's a screenshot, a view of the course notes. This is the PDF course notes that are available. Here are all of the WAN technology speeds, things like Sonnet, which is OC12, and you can see OC12 is 622.08 megabits. I've also got other views in here. Here's another one here for WAN technologies. Kind of hard to see with my big head in the way. There we go. So T3, 44.736 megabits per second. So you can see that is a big challenge in trying to figure out these pieces that's there. So that's why whenever you start trying to figure out all of these details, there's a lot of details to be had. I've taken all of these details, put them into a single PDF document. You can buy this for $10 from my website, download it immediately, and put it on all of your devices. So wherever you travel, if you got a mobile device, if you have it on your desktop at home, you can pull this information up and have a view of what's there. This is another way also to get back to the website as well. I make these free videos, and this is a way to keep things running. The hosting charges and all of the other overhead that goes into keeping a website running. And this is a great way to get back. So I appreciate everybody who has purchased the course notes. Thank you very much, and thanks for your feedback. And it's another way to learn all of those details about the Network Plus certification as well. Well, I've got more questions for you. So let's keep this party going with another set of questions. If I can find it on my screen. Here we go. So I have this question. Which of these DNS records specifies an alias or an alternative name for a domain? So now we have to flip our gears over to DNS and what DNS might be and how we might use it. There are a number of different DNS records we have to know for the Network Plus certification. And it's almost exactly the same on the N10005 and the N10006. So whichever one you're using there, you're going to need to remember these particular record types. Now, I haven't given you the name of these record types. I just gave you the abbreviation because that's how it's listed in the DNS file itself. So it's either an A record, a PTR record, a CNAME, an MX record, or an NS record. So it's got to be one of those. We're looking for an alias or an alternative name for a domain, A, PTR, CNAME, MX, or NS. There is when I started putting together my own DNS server, I grabbed an O'Reilly book on DNS. It's just this big, thick, horribly complex DNS. So I think that's one of the things that's kind of nice is that you have a lot of things that you need to know about DNS, but for your Network Plus certification, it's a very high-level view. You don't have to know a lot of detail for these specifics. So you do need to go through this list, though, and answer this. No answering in the chat room, but you should be able to go through this list and find out what it happens to be. So which one of these DNS records does specify an alias or an alternative name? The names themselves don't really give you much of a clue. So let's see how we did with this one. Let's click the button. And you can see 16% of us said A. The biggest number, 63%, said CNAME. Only 2% said PTR. Only 9% said MX. And only 9% said NS. So is it going to be CNAME, or are we going with the 63% that had that one there? Well, let's go step very quickly through these different types of records that you might run into. One is the A record. A stands for an address record. An address record is one that certainly is an important part of the DNS, but we're looking for something that is an alias. So the address record, the A record, or if it's IP version 6, the quad A record is the one we are looking for putting an address in, but we want an alias. The question was specifically having somebody go to or specify the name of a server, but they're really talking about a differently named server. And that's the CNAME, the canonical name. This is where we are putting in an alias. So if somebody types in www.professormesser.com, they may really be going to a server called fred.professormesser.com, but I've created an alias in my DNS that says if anybody ever types in www, send them over to Fred. Fred's my web server. Fred is really not my web server. That's an awful name for a web server. Well, not an awful name, but doesn't really specify what it is, does it? That's why these canonical names can be very useful. It's a good way also to point multiple services to the same device. That's a good example right here. Both Gopher, FTP, and www are all three services that are available on the mail.mydomain.name server. So by specifying the canonical name, I can simply point everybody back to the same IP address by putting that into the DNS specification. There were other records we were talking about as well. The mail exchange record, the MX, is how you specify where your mail server happens to be. PTR is a pointer record. It's kind of the reverse of taking a name and finding an IP, where you can take an IP and find a name. Well, we're not really looking for that with an alias. That's really a one-to-one type scenario. That's a good example of those different records. So we know it's not A, we know it's not pointer, we know it's not an MX, we know it's not an NS. It is the CNAME. The 66% of you that said CNAME would get that one absolutely correct. Nice job on that one. A good chunk of you got that one absolutely right. So nicely done on that one. Well, let's shift gears a little bit into networking and how we might go about setting up different ways to communicate across the network, specifically with proxies. So when we talk about proxies, there's a lot of different options available. And so I have a question for you specifically about that. This question is, what kind of proxy would be the best choice for protecting an internal web server from users that are out on the internet? And I've got a number of options available for you, again, at Socrative.com. You can go to the Socrative.com website, log in as a student, and go to the Professor Messer room, and you'll be greeted with these options. We have an A is open, B is forward, C is SSL, D is reverse, and E is closed. So we've got open, forward, SSL, reverse, and closed proxies. So one of these is going to be a good choice if we want to have an internal web server, and it's obviously on the inside of our network, and we want people to access that web server from the outside. We want to use a proxy to do that. One of these are going to be certainly the right answer for doing that. You can answer over at Socrative.com to be able to figure those pieces out. There are quite a few. This is a tricky question. This is one I don't think we've run into before. We haven't done a lot of proxies in the study group, so this would be a good one to figure out. In the chat room, someone's asking, are these examples of the level of difficulty of questions on the actual test? And I don't know. So one of the things I don't do is try to emulate what the actual test might be. I instead try to get you thinking about the actual content from the exam. All of this is certainly representative of the actual content that you would be expected to know for the exam. Yeah, difficulty of questions is something you're just going to have to figure out once you get into the exam. But if you know your content, if you know this material, really doesn't matter how difficult those questions might be with those pieces. So let's see what choice we might have for protecting our internal web server. Wow, we're completely flummoxed. Although we 100% know that it's not an open proxy. That's not the one we want to use. But boy, we are all over the place, pretty much split down the middle of four different options. Is it a forward proxy, an SSL proxy, a reverse proxy, or a closed proxy? If we had to choose exactly which one's ahead, we can't even do that because we're split between SSL and closed. So forward gets 25, reverse is probably the least number next to open. So which one of these would it possibly be? Well, let's step through these main proxy types that you need to know for your Network Plus certification. And you will be able to know the answer to this one when we are done going through this list. Let's start with the forward proxy. In a forward proxy, we have a user that's inside of our network, And this user inside of our network would like to surf the internet. They would like to go to google.com, go to yahoo.com, go to ESPN, go to CNN, go to a website out on the internet. But we don't want those users to go to those websites directly. Instead, it'd be nice if we could somehow put something in the middle of the conversation. That's a proxy. A proxy is something that's doing something on behalf of us. So the users are going to communicate to the proxy and tell the proxy, I would like to visit google.com. The proxy then goes out to google.com on its own, pulls back the information that Google's providing, and checks that information. Make sure that it's somewhere the user should be going. Make sure there's no piece of malware inside of it. Often there's some type of virus scanning software associated with a proxy, although it doesn't have to be. And then once it determines that's information that's okay for that user to see, it then presents the Google website to that particular user. So that is one where we certainly need that capability to protect our users on the insides of our network. Proxies, in this forward proxies anyway, kind of in a slower and a more aged way of doing this. They're more modern ways to protect users rather than using proxies these days, but it's certainly a very capable way of protecting this. Well, that doesn't seem to fit with the one that we were trying to do. We were trying to protect a web server that was internal. In fact, here's an example of one of those. In this particular case, we have a web server that's on the inside of our network, and we want users that are on the outside to be able to access that server. But instead of pointing users on the outside directly to our internal server, which you could certainly do with NAT, instead of doing that, we're going to point users to a proxy. And the proxy is then going to communicate internally into our network. There's proxies very often in a DMZ or somewhere that's just on the inside, but perhaps not in the very middle of our corporate network. So this is one where working on this web server is one where users are never going to touch it directly because there is a proxy right in the middle. That becomes very useful. This type of proxy is called a reverse proxy because it's one that is a little bit different than working with another kind of standard proxy. It's one where, especially for, reverse proxies is one where we're working with the reverse of somebody inside going out. It's reversed it. It's from the outside coming in. That's why we call it a reverse proxy. There is another type of proxy you do need to know of, which is the open proxy. Open proxies are useful as well. Open proxies, I guess, useful to a certain perspective anyway. I think that when people start working with these proxies on the internet, especially that first scenario, let's flip back to the forward proxy. I'm trying to get out to a website and I can't get there because the administration of this network has prevented my access to a particular website. So what I'm going to do is point my browser, instead of going to a particular server directly to ESPN, I'm going to circumvent my internal security and go to an open proxy, which is a proxy somebody has built out on the internet somewhere. And that open proxy is now going to allow me to proxy through it because my internal filter doesn't prevent me from going to this open proxy. It prevents me from going directly to ESPN. So I'm not going to go directly to ESPN. I'm going to go to this particular device. And this open proxy is going to allow me access then to get to that website that's on the other side. An open proxy is generally a significant security concern because this is effectively a device in the middle of your communication, and anything that is in the middle of your communication flow has the ability to inject information into your flow. In fact, there's a number of open proxies. There are plenty of proxies out on the internet that you could access. Let's see if I can find the ones that on the big list are things like, if you wanted to visit, for instance, proxy.org, gives you a huge list of proxies that are out there. And there's just a big list of web proxies you can choose from. Some of them have the name proxy in them, some don't, which is a good way to hide yourself from the administration. But the problem and the challenge, of course, is that whenever you start working with an open proxy, they can easily put ads inside of that. They could put malicious software. They can put anything in there and create a problem. So this is not really the most secure way to do anything. In fact, in most environments, they prevent you from going to open proxies that might be somewhere else. So let's go back to our question, which was, what kind of proxy would be the best choice for protecting an internal web server from users on the internet? And we know that a reverse proxy would be the exact way to do that. In fact, this is, if you're visiting the Professor Messer website right now, you went through a reverse proxy to get to my servers. You're not touching my servers directly. Another advantage of this is a number of pieces of my website are cached on this server as well. So you don't have to come all the way to my servers. You can get information much faster by going directly, and you didn't have to do anything to make that happen. So if you answered D, the 19% of you that answered reverse would be absolutely correct. It's not open. It's not forward. A closed proxy wouldn't get you anywhere. It's closed. So that's really not a proxy itself. And SSL is not a proxy. SSL is a protocol that can certainly be used in conjunction with a proxy, but that is not a type of proxy. So the answer reverse, if you answered D, you would have got that one absolutely correct. I think that's a pretty good one, wasn't it? Well, I've got another good one for you. This is more of an N10006 question. And in this particular case, I'm going to ask you of something that's very specific kind of technology here. And the question is, which of these cases would you use APC? Let's start the clock, shall we? Answer that one. Be good if I showed you that one. Let's show you that one. There it is. So which of these would it be? In this case, would I be decreasing convergence time? Would I be minimizing fiber return loss? Would I be increasing network throughput? Would I be minimizing errors across WAN links? Or would I be testing an interface for physical errors? One of these means I'm using APC. So now I have to know what APC is. This is not the name of a company, by the way. This is a technology. So you have to know what APC is, and then you have to know how it applies to those particular answers I gave. And I see we're trying to figure this one out in this list. It's going to be one of these. We certainly have a nice diverse set of questions and answers to choose from. Decreasing convergence time, minimizing fiber return loss, increasing network throughput, minimizing errors across WAN links, testing an interface for physical errors. Those are all very different. Yes, no Googling. That's a little cheating. No cheating. We want to figure this one out on our own. This is an N10006 technology. This is something that is new on the N10006 versus the 005. So if you're studying for the 005, you won't necessarily really need to know this. If you're studying for the 006, you absolutely need to know this. So you've got a couple of options available for that. And a lot of people saying, yeah, APC, that's the company, American Power Corporation, that makes the UPS systems. Well, that's certainly an APC, but you'll notice none of these answers had anything to do with power. So it's not power. It's not APC, the company. This is APC, the technology. So you already thought of that. I didn't want to put a power answer there, or that would throw everyone off. So that is the real key, is trying to figure that piece out. So you can't, yes, no binging it, no altavisting it. That goes way back, doesn't it? It's really Bing and Google at this point. Not a lot of other options available for the general searching, is there? So let's see how we did. And we're taking a much longer time with this one as we are trying to figure out the answers with this one. So I'm going to go straight over to it and see how we did, since we're all in this is another one. We're sort of all over the place with this one. If we had to choose the one that had the most number of answers, it would be C, increased network throughput, which in this case is not necessarily, or at least not the best answer. And of course, on the Network Plus exam, you have to choose the best answer. We're talking here about using APC. The next highest would be decreased convergence time, and right behind that is testing an interface for physical errors. The two that got the least number of responses are minimizing errors across WAN links and minimizing fiber return loss. So one of these would be absolutely the right answer for these. Again, no answering in the chat room. I'm going to have to get rid of some of those too as we're going through those pieces. Let's see what the answer might be. And it's really a comparison of different technologies that we want to figure out. The difference is UPC versus APC. So we have to know both of these for the N10006 exam. And this is all about controlling light and how light works on fiber-based networks. Whenever we have information that's going through a fiber, there's going to be at some point where you have to put two connectors together. And those two connectors have a tendency to not line up 100% correctly. There's a little bit of difference between those two connectors. And so some of the light gets reflected back whenever you have these two pieces connecting to each other. So there's two different kinds of connectors that you could have there in that particular scenario. And both of these you'll need to know for your exam. This is, we start working with it. The UPC is the ultra polished connection, and it is a 0 degree angle. These two pieces of fiber are connecting directly to each other. The APC is at an angle. That's what the A is for. And the angle, it's an 8 degree angle. It's not a huge angle difference, very slight angle. But the difference is instead of the light coming directly back and reflecting directly back to the other side, it now goes off at an angle. Here's what this looks like. So you've got two pieces of fiber connecting to each other. This is the connection right here in the middle. And you notice because they're connecting at that 0 degree, the light reflects exactly back 180 degrees. And so that light goes back to the place where it was sent, and you get a lower amount of light, total light sent across this particular link. Instead, you use something like an angle polish connector. Again, just a slight angle. But when those two things meet, instead of reflecting back 180 degrees, it's going off at an angle. So now you don't have a reflection back to the device that's sending the signal. You now have that light going somewhere else, out of the way. And now you get a larger amount of light going through that particular connection. So that is one where when you start working with these polished connections and working with connecting fiber together, and somebody says, oh, what kind of connection do you need? I need an APC on this one because we want to maximize the amount of light going through. There's a lot of different options available for fiber. And in the videos, I have all of these different sizes of fiber, types of fiber, connections of fiber, and you absolutely need to know these for your Network Plus certification. And I think that's whenever I start working with these and trying to figure out all of these pieces, there's a ton to know. So make sure you go through all of your fiber technologies and know them. And it's almost exactly the same on the N10005 and 006. This is just a slight difference, the 006 anyway, to be able to have that there. I think the 006 adds the APC and the UPC, but it's basically exactly the same for all of the others as well. So make sure you know fiber really well for your exam. There's a lot of topics on it. You're almost certain to get a question or two about those technologies. So there's a lot to know for the Network Plus exam. There's not just information about fiber and the way that it works, but we also have to know about operating systems, and we have to know how to use different tools to be able to troubleshoot a network at the command line, and we need to understand how different technologies work and how protocols are sent across the network. And a good way to learn these technologies is to put it into a lab environment and be able to work with it. My folks at GTS Learning, my friends, have put together Freestyle, which is a series of live practice labs for both the N10005 and the N10006, which is labs. They have practice tests and questions that you can go through. Their book is also available as part of this. There's quite a different set in there to be able to work with these and have them there. Before I show you that, let me quickly go back because I think folks in the chat were asking about this. The answer to that last one was B, minimizing the fiber return loss. The 16% of you that answered B would have gotten that one absolutely correct because you're minimizing the amount of light that's being reflected back across the fiber. B would be correct. So these practice labs, by the way, are all online. They're all in the cloud. They're real Windows systems. There are real routers. There are real switches out there, and you're not emulating an environment. So you're using a real virtual environment to make this work, which really makes it all the more powerful when you start working with it. These labs are set up to provide you a lot of different options and be able to run a lot of different scenarios. The 006 labs are also available. Somebody in the chat room was asking about that. They have both 005 and 006 labs available, so you really can't go wrong. And I have a special price for this. You don't pay the regular price you would get if you went to the GTS Learning website. If you use my link, you get all of this for the discounted price of $99. So this is one where you can go out to professormesser.com/netlabs and you'll be able to select those particular options. What I like about these labs also is that I don't have to set up anything. This is all online. I can do it from any browser. I don't need any special software. It uses HTML5, so it's something that's built into all of these browser technologies. And it's one, when I start working through the labs, they're pretty comprehensive with how they work. I think I've got a lab here. I can even show you what some of these look like. Let's pull one out. I'll pop one out and show you. Here's a lab that is one for understanding network protocols, and it shows you how the lab is set up. And they take you through this lab and say, here's what you need to do. Here's the process to go through. Step 1, here's what you want to do. Configure a port for FTP. So it takes you through the configurations of all of these step by step. So if you think you know how to do it, you can jump ahead. But if you're not quite sure, you've got screens to go to. You can also try this for absolutely free. So this is another nice thing about this, is you've got the ability to see if this is really going to work for you. If you want to try it out, see if this is going to be worthwhile for things that you'd like to do, just go to professormesser.com/netlabs and you will absolutely be able to use these technologies for an hour for absolutely free. See if it works for you. And if it doesn't, that's fine. You can, of course, set up your own labs, read your books, whatever makes sense for the way you need to learn. Some people need a lot of hands-on, and this is another great way to do it without setting up anything on your side. So I want to thank the folks at GTS Learning for doing this. They've set up, in fact, I think I've got the labs running right here. I'm going to connect to this domain controller. I've got this in a browser running HTML5, and I think I just started this one up. So I've got all of these running on my network. And what I did was go through the entire list of these, and there's my domain controller, and just started them all up. So here's a Windows domain controller. I've got it at a very high resolution. You can see the response time's really good with being able to work with this. Because it's a live Windows machine. It's simply a remote desktop, so I don't need anything on my side. I have a Windows 7 machine here. There's the Windows 7 device. Again, nice and fast capabilities there. Another gateway device. I've got other devices here, a web server. And notice the gateway device even has Wireshark, so I can start doing some packet captures of the network and start pulling in and looking at data at the protocol level. Just a great resource. So find out more about that, professormesser.com/netlabs, and you can try that for yourself. We've got more questions for you. So let's go through the next set of questions. I've got, which of these technologies would not be used to authenticate user logins? I think we were talking about user authentication. I was talking on YouTube. Somebody was leaving some YouTube comments earlier today about authentication methods. Their network was slowing down. Would authentication be slowing down the entire network? And the quick answer, of course, is no. Authentication, something happens very quickly. But there are a number of different technologies you can use to authenticate to resources that might be on your network. So of the options available, you have Radius, Syslog, LDAP, TACACS+, and Kerberos. So all of these are able to be used to authenticate user logins except for one. I want to know which of these technologies would not be used to authenticate user logins. It's got to be one of these, right? I've got one of these in my mix that I would use to be able to do this. So it's got to be one of these. So you do need to know what all of these technologies are so that you can then apply them back. This is one where I almost have to know what each one of those is all the time to be able to do that. Radius, Syslog, you've got a number of options available. LDAP, TACACS+, Kerberos. So which one is it? Go out to Socrative.com, go to the Professor Messer room name, and you will be able to do that. There's this is one you'll use a lot, by the way, in the enterprise, because so many different devices need to be able to authenticate. You'll put a switch into the network, a router, a firewall, a file server, a video server, a proxy server. All of these devices need to allow or disallow access to some level, and having an authentication server makes this so simple, especially since now you can go to the central server, enable or disable access to particular resources. When somebody leaves the organization, you simply disable their login, and now they can't access any of the resources. The alternative, of course, is that on every device, you can go to every device and create a local login to every device. And if somebody needs to change a password, you have to now visit all of those devices again. If somebody leaves the organization, you have to visit all of those devices again to delete that user. What a pain to be able to do those things. So let's see how we did with this one. One of these is not a user authentication. Wow, if we go with the people who chose the most, it would be 62%. The vast majority would certainly be syslog. I think you were on to this one and figuring out those pieces, because certainly Radius, LDAP, TACAX Plus, and Kerberos certainly fit into the different categories of things you would need to use for authentication. We often see this being used on things like 802.1x, but they could, of course, these individual technologies can be used separately. We could set up a Radius server and have our switch, our router, our firewall authenticate to Radius to be able to log us in. We don't have to have a complex system like 802.1x to be able to do this. And I've listed here Radius, LDAP, TACAX Plus. Kerberos is certainly a very popular. Windows uses Kerberos, for instance, to perform its authentication to the domain controllers in a domain type environment. So again, a lot of different ways to authenticate. Whichever one is going to be, this is the real challenge, whichever one you're going to use in your environment is really going to determine which way you go. Most environments will use some type of system. A lot of places just use Kerberos, because the Windows domain controllers also have an LDAP function, and LDAP is a lot more open. You're able to integrate with a lot of other devices by using that. So there's really not in the chat room which one's best. The one that's best is the one that fits best with what you're trying to accomplish. All of these are effectively performing, at least from an authentication perspective, performing exactly the same thing. So if you're a big Windows environment and you already have Active Directory set up, and you have these domain controllers, why not integrate the authentication to Active Directory? Because you already have business processes built around that. When somebody joins the organization, they're given an Active Directory account. They're provided access via certain groups. When they leave the organization, their account is disabled automatically. So from an authentication perspective, you don't even have to think about it. They just get the access they need, and they're able to do that. But if you're not a Windows environment, Kerberos is probably not the easiest thing to set up. So instead, you might do something like Radius or LDAP or TACAX Plus. LDAP is probably the second most popular past Active Directory. If you're not running Kerberos and Active Directory, then you're probably using OpenLDAP or a technology like that to provide databases for your environment as well. I've seen that with a customer I used to go to that had all Macs, just tons of Apple software, hardware, and they used LDAP to be able to have a central database, integrate these things together. So let's do another, shall we? I've got another one that you could choose from. This one happens to be associated with IPv6. Everybody loves IPv6, right? And the question is, which of these would not be a valid IP6 address? And go. Got a lot of choices, by the way. Let's show you these choices. Where would they be? I'm not going to read all of these choices, but I put a lot of them here. These are all valid IPv6 addresses except for one. So you have to understand the IPv6 address scheme to be able to determine this. So this is one where you do have to know IPv6. IPv6 is now, well, it's here. It's on everybody's environment to be able to do that. And let me, for those of you that were asking about the previous answer, the authentication syslog wasn't in my list. You'll notice syslog. In fact, I have that. Keep missing that, don't I? Radius, LDAP, TACAX, Kerberos, but no syslog. If you answered syslog, you got that one absolutely correct. So on this one, we're back to IPv6. So IPv6, all of the operating systems you're going to use these days have IPv6 in them. All of your ISPs these days have IPv6 enabled technologies, even if you're not taking advantage of them yet. They've already got them. They've already implemented them. Their firewalls, their routers, their other networking devices are all IPv6 aware at this point. They've been working very hard to implement IPv6 aware devices at this point. So you want to be able to try those IPv6. Just go out, see if you know which IPv6 is not correct there by going to Socrative.com to the room name Professor Messer. So there's quite a few to go through in this list. So I'm going to give you a moment. I see only a few have answered at this point because there's a lot of addresses here and you have to count. IPv6 tends to be rather tedious. Now, fortunately, if you're managing an IPv6 network, it's not quite as tedious as this because the first half of the IPv6 address tends to be exactly the same. You tend to use a 64-bit subnet mask with IPv6, so the first half of the address tends to be static for your organization, and the only thing that changes is the bottom, the next half of those pieces. So you got a lot to go through for those, be able to work those different options. Let's see how we did. So about half of us have answered this one. How do we do? Wow. We are, again, a lot of different options. Some have 0. Some folks said A looks good. F tends to look good. Most of us chose B, which is : 1. 32% chose C, and 17% chose E. But we have single digits on A, D, and F. So which one of these could it possibly be? Well, let's look at the structure of IPv6 and how it's laid out. IPv6 is a 128-bit address. It's enormous, especially when IPv4, you were talking a 32-bit address. This is huge, 128 bits to have all of that here. So you can see the number of places. I even ran out of room on my screen. So all of us on the earth could have that many addresses, 5 with all of those zeros after it, addresses individually with those scenarios. That's why DNS becomes so important. We're going to be referencing everything by name without knowing their IPv6. In fact, you may be communicating to certain websites already via IPv6. You just don't know it because DNS is already taking care of that behind the scenes for you to be able to work with that. There is, as I mentioned, a 64-bit subnet, usually how you will use it. It's usually provided to you by the ISP that way to be able to use it. So I think there's a lot of different options available. Now, one of the challenges with IPv6 is that it is a hexadecimal address and it is 128 bits long. And we represent the address in hexadecimal. So we're converting all this binary to hex. In fact, on your Network Plus, the N10006, you have to be able to convert between decimal and hexadecimal. So I have videos for that. And you can see there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 groups. And we can collapse or abbreviate these groups together by using double colons. And the double colons simply replace the zeros that might be in there. For more detail on that, you can go to my IPv6 video. I take you through a couple of scenarios where you go through the process of collapsing down an IPv6 address. So there is a number of options on our screen then. Now, if we look at this, we can see we have a double colon here, so there were zeros. So these all look correct. We've got the right number groupings here. It's certainly under 8 because we have the double colon that collapses zeros, and it all appears to be hexadecimal. So A does appear to be a valid IPv6 address. What's the second highest? We got 4%. This one down here on F, FE80, : blah, blah. That all looks like it is also within those 8 groups. It's got all hexadecimal representations. That one's fine as well. Next highest is D. And again, we've got, a good valid IPv6 address there. What we're looking for is something that doesn't seem to fit that hexadecimal or the number of groups. So this E is a big one, but we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 groups of hexadecimal there. So that's not an invalid address. That's perfectly valid. So we've got colon 1 was the number one here, but colon 1 is actually the loopback address. That is an absolutely valid IPv6 address. So B is actually not the correct answer here. B is a valid IPv6 address. The one that is not valid is C. C is not a valid IPv6 address. It does have the right number of groups. You see it uses the double colons to collapse the zeros, and there's certainly less than 5 groups, or less than 8 groups in this particular, but you'll notice that the second set of grouping of hexadecimal values, these second grouping of bytes, 22H0, H is not a valid hexadecimal number. Hexadecimal uses 0 through 9 and A through F, and that's it. Anything above F means that there isn't the correct one there. So if you answered C, then you found the IPv6 address that was not correct. And that would be the correct answer here. The correct answer is the incorrect answer, and that would be C. If you answered C, you got that one absolutely right. Well, we've gone through a lot of content. We're already through an hour. I looked up and we're already through an hour of content. Boom, just like that. We've gone through quite a bit in a short period of time. If you're watching this video for credit for your continuing educations, just simply go to the top of the Professor Messer website and send me a message. There's a button there for Contact Us, and just send me a note in there with your name, your email address, and use the term IPv6, and I will know that you watched this particular study group. So that was one that becomes handy. Before we finish out, I will remind you, my tip of the month always is to look at this right here. That's the one I want to show you. It's the exam objectives. If you go to professormesser.com/objectives, you would be able to go through and use these particular exams objectives to be able to know exactly what to study. I was mentioning earlier today that some of this content was on 005, some of this content was new on 006. I knew that because I had a copy of the exam objectives. It tells you everything you need to know for the exam. If you take nothing away from today, take away that you need to download the CompTIA exam objectives for the exam that you plan to take and study them and use them as a checklist. That's also going to be able to tell you when you're going to be ready to take the exam, because you'll be able to go through the entire set of objectives and check off that you know all of those different topics. That would be a very, very easy way to do this. Well, we're not going to ask any more questions about that. I'm going to finish things up. If you are watching live, I'll open up the phone lines in just a moment for the after show, where we talk about any topics, not just Network Plus, but anything else, just something we do during the live show here. I will remind you, of course, that my course notes can be found on professormesser.com. My YouTube, Twitter, Google Plus, and Facebook links are there. Just type in Professor Messer / Google Plus / Facebook / Twitter. You'll find it. No problems there. Again, the discount vouchers for the 10% discount you can get at professormesser.com/vouchers. Again, my thanks to GTS Learning and their live labs at professormesser.com/netlabs, where you can try it free for an hour. And again, thanks to you. This wouldn't be any fun if I was sitting here alone waiting for people to answer these questions. And I don't have to, because you're joining us and participating in the chat and following along with everything that we're doing here. And I thank you so much for joining me live. If you want to know when the next live event is, check the Professor Messer website. There's a calendar link right at the top, and I've listed out all of the different study groups for the next couple of months. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us. Stick around for the after show, but I'm going to end the main show right now. We'll see you next time on the study group. Thanks, everyone. That was a lot of information in a very short period of time. That went really, really, really quick. That was surprising how fast that went. So the chat, the graphical information, the slides that you're seeing, the content that you're seeing, a huge amount of it is in my study guides, in my course notes. My course notes have practically everything, every graph, every diagram I've created. So the picture, for instance, of those different fiber connectors is in my course notes. All of those different bandwidths of the different technologies, it's in my course notes. So absolutely, it's in there. Absolutely. Let's get the phone lines open, though. What was I going to do? I was going to do phone lines through this. What was I going to do with phone lines? In the after show, we tend to talk about, I don't know, anything. Let's put this on my front screen this time. I have to remember how to get there. Oh, and it's a Skype thing too. This is the one where we all get to follow along with me typing things in. So don't call in yet. You see the number, but I haven't started the show. Let's host a show. You can't see this on your side because it's got the special numbers here. Start the show. Let's start the show. And I need to call into the show just like you're going to call into the show. And I have to know the numbers. So let's do that right now. Boop, 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 boop.
Thank you for calling.
You're welcome for me calling. I am this number with that number.
Enter your 6-digit.
Okay. I think that did it.
You are now in the host.
I am. So now you can call in. If you'd like to chat, you don't have to, but if you'd like to, you can call 855-785-7545. That's 855-785-RJ45. And I made it an 800 number, so you can call from anywhere in the world absolutely free on Skype, and you don't have to pay anything. Absolutely free. I pay for it. Somebody pays for it. I pay for it. That's pretty easy to be able to do that. Which transfer method is best? Least performance issues for copying files over to another server. This sounds like something, but that somebody's copied from something else. It sounds like an A+ question, actually. We don't have to worry about that for the Network Plus. That particular show, was I talking too much? It seems like I got through not as many questions as I normally do. So I sort of apologize for that. But a lot of the questions required a little more explanation. I try to talk as fast as I can without talking so fast you can't understand what I'm saying. I do try to talk, keep things moving. Some weeks or some months I'm able to get more questions in than others. So this time I actually had a couple questions left over. I just wasn't able to do it, but we'll do them next time. So it helps me. I don't have to. It takes a while to prep. It takes about half a day to prep for this. So I sit down in the morning or an afternoon, and it takes that much time to get it. You got to do the questions. Got to think about the questions. Figure out what you're going to ask. Change the questions around. Get perspective answers. Make the answers hard as you can, or want to. Grab the information that explains the answers, put them into the presentation, go to Socrative, put the questions in there. It does a little bit of time. We are done with Socrative. So Socrative's great, isn't it? It is just great. I'm going to finish Socrative. In fact, I'll just go to the dashboard. There we go. And it's ended. And I think it might even give you information at the end for these pieces. Now I can get some warm beverage. My voice not doing so well this week, is it? I have a bit of a frog in my throat. And this week I had to get the study group finished Thursday because I took my family out to the movies on yesterday. And we went to go see the Jurassic World movie. Is that what it's called? Jurassic something? Not a big fan of I like going to movies. Jurassic, not my thing. Actually, it was much better than I was expecting. I'm not big into scary action, jump out at you movies, but it was not as jump out at you as I thought it was going to be. So I'm pretty happy about that. It was actually mildly entertaining. It was not a cerebral exercise by any stretch of the imagination. But it was a lot of fun to be able to take everybody out. It's kind of hard. It's me and my wife and 3 kids. So there's 5 of us. So when we go somewhere, we're all going, and they're kids who are, in college and high school. So we're big people that are going places these days. And in fact, for those of you in the chat room wondering, this week I did move my Xbox into the studio. You can't see it's on the other side of me. You're seeing behind my left shoulder. It's behind my right shoulder on the other side of the fireplace there. And I did. I've got, you really can't see it very well here, but I've got a television that is right in front of me. It's on rollers. So I roll it over to the other side of the studio to plug the Xbox in. I simply sit here. I just spin around. And obviously on the Xbox One, it's a wireless controller. So makes it easy. Do I have a list of different network tools that are necessary, such as Wireshark, Heat Map? Wireshark's it. That's what you need is Wireshark. Very, very simple to have that there. So it's that should be the number one network analysis tool you need. You really don't see much more than that. It's going to help you on wired networks, on wireless networks. It's going to help you understand protocols, to understand what type of information is secure and not secure going through the network, to troubleshoot performance problems, to understand how secure your communication might be. Very, very useful to have that there. I did see the movie in IMAX 3D because I rarely go to the movies. Rarely go to the movies. I'm usually in here or we'll watch a movie at home. But you take 5 people to the movies, you can understand why I don't go to the movies a lot. So if we're going to go, I'm going to watch it in the IMAX. I'm going to watch it 3D because I love that technology. I think that's a lot of fun. And for that kind of movie, certainly a lot of fun. You wouldn't go watch, a Pride and Prejudice type movie in IMAX 3D. They probably wouldn't make it in IMAX 3D, but this is the kind of movie you want IMAX 3D. So that's a lot of fun. Question about what security certs do I consider to be a good choice after this? And security certs, I guess, in the industry, security there's really one big certification, and Jeremy mentioned it, the CISSP. The CISSP is probably the one most people are looking for, but we tend to also, at that level, when we're talking about security, we tend to see more specific certifications. So they're usually a company certification. So if you have a firewall, you're getting a Palo Alto Networks, a Checkpoint, a Fortinet certification, or Cisco certification in security, or you're working with something very specific. Technology, you're getting it from that company. Just because at that point, it's not a broad set of people who will need that knowledge. And so you don't tend to get a very broad offering for certifications. But CISSP is a very good high level and respected certification in security. And it's just like anything else. Some organizations love for you to have certifications. Some organizations don't really care so much. The work you've done in networking or the work you've already done on the firewall or the work you've already done in the infrastructure helps you a lot in security. And I speak specifically about people who are in network security. You're in an organization, there's a security team. That security team is almost always someone who started on the network side and they got into security. I'm speaking as someone who is, I just left 6.5 years at a security startup, and I got to go to a lot of different places all over the eastern United States and talk to people about their network security. And so I got to really see where these people started. And I get to ask them, how did you get into the security part of this organization? We started in networking. And that's really because with security, you need to know as much networking as possible. That's why I like the Network Plus certification, because you can use Network Plus anywhere. But if you're going into security, you have to know networking. You have to understand port level security on a switch. So you have to know switching. You have to understand routes because you're setting up layer 3 devices for firewalls, and understanding routing protocols to integrate those with other pieces, and understanding the network address translations and how to do that through those devices. IPsec is nothing but networking and security. It's networking with certificates stuck on top of it. That's really important to know the networking side of it, because if you know the network piece of it, you're well on your way to understanding the security side, because at that point, it's not really function, it's form. Network address translation is the easy part. Why you're doing the network address translation is the hard security part. IPsec is easy to set up, relatively speaking. Why you're setting up the IPsec and how you're able to make sure it's secure is the important security part of it. So that's why networking, I think, has such a large emphasis whenever you go to these security departments, because it is. So people land senior level security positions after having X years of networking. It certainly is a big requirement. If you know no networking, you're not going to get a security job. You're not. You will be completely lost. Unless your job, I'm talking network security in these organizations. There are niche jobs you can get in security that are taking a piece of malware, decompiling it, and looking at the machine code of how that piece of software attacked a computer, and then building a defense mechanism for that piece of malware. That I'm not talking about those jobs. It's a very niche job. You're going to go work for an anti-malware company with that level of knowledge, or you're going to be creating malware with that level of knowledge. You're not going to need a lot of networking expertise, but you don't really find those people in the normal network security organizations, you're not going to find those in a life insurance company, in a transportation company. If your company makes soda, if you make alarm systems, you're really trying to protect your assets over your network. You're not really going to decompile malware. That's a very specialized network security function. You don't really have to know programming. I know a lot of emphasis these days in the IT networking / security is around Python, and it's great to know a flexible programming language. It's great to know operating systems. It's great to know as much as you can about as much as you can, especially with security. But you don't have to know how to do C programming, how to program iOS apps to be able to protect our iOS apps. It's helpful to know how people are attacking these programs. Are they using buffer overflows? What does that really mean? Are they doing a man in the middle? How do I prevent that? How do I identify that? Those are specific attacks. Are they using a cross-site script? So those types of things are really important to know how that happens. But it doesn't really have anything to do with doing your day-to-day job. Knowing how that works is different than actually programming the language itself. I can use a browser. I don't have to know how the browser was programmed. So that's kind of that scenario. You don't really have to know programming to do pen testing. Again, it helps if you know what a cross-site script is, what a buffer overflow is, how people would perform a denial of service attack on a particular application. But pen testing is another one of those very specialized niche jobs. And you certainly need to know networking for pen testing. Absolutely. To be able to do that. Yeah. And in the chat room, people are going, oh, okay. Yeah, if you look at, that's a very good way to do it, Jordan, is go out to LinkedIn, to the people you know are in security jobs. What were they doing prior to the security job? You can tell me if I'm on point or if I'm completely off point with this one. And I'm on point with this one. Find out what they were doing. Don't look at my LinkedIn, because I was just all over the place. I did networking. I did marketing. I did all kinds. Systems engineer. Mine was just all over the place. Sometimes, if you know, the more you know about the more you know helps you as well. My big emphasis is I did a lot of protocol analysis, a lot of networking, a lot of network management. Then I got into security based on that. So in a way, I'm exactly what I said commonly does there. That's very useful. If you know programming, if you know how to build an iOS app, if you know how to manipulate things using Python, it only helps you. If you have an interest in that, do it. I have an interest in a number of technologies. I'd like to try them out. I'll load up Swift, so I can try the Swift app, see if I can make an iOS app. I'll try, I've done some C++ programming in my background. I've done Visual Basic in my background. I've done a lot of really bad Perl scripting. If you need a bad Perl script, I'm the guy for you. I can build you the ugliest, most oddly shaped Perl script you've ever seen. It will work. You'll have no idea why. But it will. In fact, I'll have no idea why, but it will. So that's one of those things when you start working with these programming languages, absolutely it will help you. Because when you start working on the programming language and they talk to you about buffer overflows, and this is how buffer overflows happen, you're like, yes, I know exactly what you're referencing there. I understand exactly what you're trying, where that came from with those pieces. It's one of those ways to go. You're really, when you're trying to figure it out, what should I be doing? Where should I go? Choose something that interests you. And whatever you choose now is going to be different in 5 years, in 10 years. Okay, so when I started with this security startup, which is now, it's about 7 years ago. So I quit in February. So that was 6.5 years. So I started 7 years ago. There was no Twitter. Didn't exist. So since that time, an entire method of communication has been created and has begun the maturation process. We are clearly in the infancy. There's not much on the mature side there. There's a little bit. You can kind of scrape it off the top. But find the technology that interests you. I got started doing PC repair, and really it was more printer cable delivery, and then did a little bit of upgrades in there. So I would upgrade a hard drive or I would install hard drives. I would install their first hard drive. Wow. Okay, it takes me back. Or I would upgrade the memory. And that migrated into working at a help desk at a life insurance company. And from there, I really got into Windows, the Windows operating system, understanding how it worked, understanding how to manage it in a large environment like this. And that took me into networking. And the networking piece, I learned all about the networking and the protocols and TCP and how does that work? And how do I communicate out the internet? And how do I use these different technologies? And then that took me into protocol analysis. So when I started doing cable delivery, I had no idea I was going to spend 5 years at a company that did nothing but protocol analysis. I didn't even know what protocol analysis was. And at the time, I think probably when I started my career, that protocol analysis technology didn't exist. So I sort of made my way into it. In fact, that must be the case because the company I worked with when I started working with that, I think got the second token ring sniffer off the line. So off the assembly line, they got one of their very first ones. And it was great because you could see everything. But I would have never been able to plan my career. You just sort of follow it. The interest that you have leads you in a direction. And companies want people who are interested in these technologies, who can wrap their arms around it, learn everything about it, and help support it and keep that company going. And I started with Windows. I ended up in security. So, and the path to get there was all over the place. So don't think that you have to start somewhere and that's your path. It's not going to be. In technology, it's not going to be. There's no way. It can't be, because the programming languages that were around when I started are completely different these days. And whenever you try to figure it out, just go with what's interesting for you, because that's really what's going to be the most important part. You need to get up every day and go to work and enjoy it. Life's too short to do anything else. So, and then just follow that path. Just keep going with it. It's a lot of fun when you do it that way, from my perspective. And there's so very few there's so very few things you can do that allow you that level of flexibility. Information technology absolutely gives you that flexibility where you can start doing one thing one day, 5 years later, you're doing something completely different. You can't do that in transportation. You can't do that in insurance. You can't do that in making soda. You have to be in something that gives you that flexibility. That's why I get a lot of people coming to my website that I'm driving a truck, I'm working in retail, I'm doing this other job. I'm much more interested in doing something with technology. Fantastic. Great. Because once you do that, you can really do anything. Go back to work for the trucking company doing their IT. Go back to work, instead of being a nurse, go back to work at the hospital working on their IT. And there you get to work with all the IT, and you actually know. You can apply back something practical to those technologies. Very, very useful to have that. For the Network Plus certification, someone in the chat room, King's asking about setting up a router and a switch to work. You don't really necessarily have to have a router or switch or any physical device to get your Network Plus certification. You only have to be able to use things at the command line. So be able to ping be able to trace route, perform a dig or an NS lookup. There's a list of command lines you have to know for your Network Plus certification. Go look at that list. Make sure you can go to the command line and do some basic troubleshooting, because you're going to do this in your home office and your home internet. And somebody says, I'm having slowness to a particular site on the internet. Well, where's the slowness happening? Let's do a trace route and find out. And this happened on my ISP this past month. There was slowness. There was big slowness. And I've got pretty high speed network in this studio. Had to be somewhere. Did I screw something up in the studio or was it outside the studio? Let's do a trace route to that server. And I was able to watch it go through, and right in the middle were enormous response times that got very slow. And I even performed an MTR, that MTR utility. I think there's a Win MTR as well. MTR gives you a step-by-step. I'll show you one. Let's do an MTR to 8888. Here I'm performing the My Trace route. That's MTR. So I'm going to 8888, and it's going out to that server, and you can see it's popping through, and it keeps incrementing the numbers here. So you can see it's telling me how much was lost, how many have been sent, what the last response times were, average, best, worst, and standard deviation of pings. So I can see where's the worst ping time. So if I had to find the worst ping time, let's do average. Average, you can see the slowest is here. It's 17.1 milliseconds, which is very, 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 very small. So that's a useful thing to do as well. You can perform those tools if you're comfortable performing those tools and know when to use them, and can use those to start troubleshooting problems. You've got what you need to know for the exam. You don't have to set up your own router. You don't have to know how to configure a switch. You don't have to know Cisco commands or any other manufacturer's commands for that matter. You just have to know how to set it up and get it running, and you'll absolutely be able to do that. Where do I get the MTR? MTR was running on OS 10, but there is Win, WIN MTR for Windows, and that is at, well, who knew, winmtr.net. Does that site exist? It's trying. Is it real? Yes, it is. So WinMTR, free network diagnostics tool. It's great. That's fantastic. It's kind of like a ping and a trace route in one, and it just keeps going over and over and over and starts accumulating statistics. I can't live without it now. I first saw this. I had a problem very early on, probably a couple of web servers ago, and I was working with this, and they said, well, we need you to run WinMTR for about 5 minutes and send us the results. Send us a screenshot so we can see. So they could see the trace route. They could see where the gaps were. They could look at the statistics over that time frame. And I was able to point to it and they go, okay, there it is. I ran that. It was, I was running it in Linux at the time from my Linux servers. So I was running it out of my web servers out to somewhere else on the internet. It's a fantastic tool. Just, it's free. Free. It's all free. If you are in Linux or OS 10, it's just MTR, My Trace Route. That's what that stands for. Useful tool to have. Well, I had questions for this week as well. I need to pop over and have a look at those. Let me find it. You won't see this on your side, but I will pop open my spreadsheet for those pieces. This would be the Network Plus study group. You'll notice I have the study groups all spec'd out through July. So you should be able to look at the calendar at professormesser.com/calendar and have a look at when the next ones are. I've already got the dates for August and September. I really need to put those in there as well. So I'm trying to plan these well ahead of time. Next month, the Network Plus study group is not on a Saturday. In July, the study group will be on a Wednesday. A little bit different because I wanted my Saturday back. Doing something. I'm busy. I'm a busy guy. I got stuff going on. It's not that exciting, but I just didn't I just had a calendar conflict. So that's one of those Saturdays will not be available online. Okay. How much of the exam will cover binary, decimal, and hexadecimal? For the N10 005, you only need to know binary to decimal. But the N10 006 includes binary, decimal, hexadecimal, and octal. How you like that? So I have videos that it's very simple to make the conversions. Very simple. I show you how to make a little chart. You make the little chart and you can do it in a matter of moments to do the conversions. So it depends on the exam. They added quite a bit. The N10 006, they didn't just copy the exam objectives. They really restructured them. And in almost every category, they added something. So I went almost every video, certainly a lot more than half of my videos had to be changed with some new content. A lot of them were exactly the same content, and I reshot them and added a few things myself, but the content was definitely there. So that was a big change to the 006, and in the 006 they added a lot of content as well. So make sure you look through those. So if you're taking the 006, you'll need to know hexadecimal and octal. If you're taking the 005, you just need to know binary and decimal for those two pieces. I didn't have any OSI model questions. A lot of people ask about the OSI model. I'm trying not to overload things with OSI model in the study group because that could happen easy. There are certain questions I get every month, and OSI models a lot of them. So that's why I don't go through a lot of those pieces for this. Let's scroll down a bit. I have a lot to scroll down. My apologies. Okay. I've got a lot of questions this time about expiration of the certifications. I think I talked about this at the beginning, but you should definitely think about when these are retiring. For instance, in the chat room right now, somebody's asking, I've been studying Network Plus. Would it be best to continue the 005 or start studying the 006? I guess that would depend on your level of knowledge. If you think you can get through all of the 005 content and pass the exam by August 31st, you'll be fine. But we're getting close now. We're 2.5 months away from that date. Now, there's not a huge difference in content between the 005 and 006. There's differences, certainly. Things were added, but it's effectively the same type of information. It's not like it's a dramatic difference, or unlike the A+, which tends to change operating systems every time. Networking doesn't change that much. There's some new protocols. There's another new network type. That's kind of it. I would, if you're starting right now, start studying the 006. But if you've already been studying the 005 and you really think you can pass before August 31st, do that, because that's an easy way to take care of that one. You can really step through and get those done very, very quickly. I think that's another important one to consider. You don't want to study all of this and then all of a sudden there's no more 005 and you kind of have to start over again with your checklist of things. That's very useful. And they're right. Justin's talking about in the chat room about IPv6 and what you need to know about IPv6. The Network Plus doesn't get very deep into IPv6, but the 006 version added a number of IPv6 technologies. IPv6 is very wide and very deep, and they took you a little bit deeper through this latest version of the Network Plus exam. There are some new technologies, especially the way that IPv6 addresses are automatically assigned, because you don't have to have a DHCP server anymore, and yet you can still get an IPv6 address. That works great. How does that work? Well, it's part of the new 006 exam objectives. So, and there's a lot more IPv6 going on right now. It's going to be interesting to see how long it takes. And I think what it's going to take, IPv6 has really been designed to be invisible to the end user. And so I think it's going to take all the operating systems now. We've had it running for a little bit. We're waiting for the infrastructure to get changed. And that's really the key, because not only does the infrastructure need to get changed, you're talking about significant investments in equipment for this to get updated. And that takes time and takes a lot of money. And once you do it, some of the software running on that infrastructure equipment is not fully IPv6. And they're going to find bugs with the IPv6 routing or addressing schemes or sending the data back and forth. There's security problems we're going to find. All of those have to get worked out of the system. And eventually we'll start doing a lot more IPv6 directly to a client, to a home, and start using it that way. I think that's one of the keys for that piece. Yeah, and then finally NAT can go away, or at least NAT from a security perspective. There's some nice capabilities in IPv6 that will keep our data secure. Boy, that'll drive everyone crazy to have secure data. And it's one of these things that really is going to be important going forward. And that's why the ISPs are working so hard right now to get all of that equipment installed, get it running, get it tested. And it's a very, very long set of projects, in some cases years long. To think, if you're an enormous ISP, if you're a Verizon, if you're an AT&T, if these companies have thousands of routers, thousands of firewalls, that's a huge project to convert some of these things over. So that's pretty important to have those there. Let's go back to our questions, shall we? Yeah, I didn't do any subnetting this time, or any. There's just so much on the Network Plus exam. A lot of people really focus on subnetting because it's math. It's a thing you have to learn. It's a relatively difficult concept to begin thinking in binary and figuring out how all of these things are separated out. Subnetting is certainly a challenge. But I think people will spend way too much time on subnetting for the 005 and 006. You might get a subnetting question. You might get two. And don't spend all of your time on subnetting. Subnetting is important for you to know. Absolutely learn how to subnet. You should be able to do it in your head, or at least be able to write it down very quickly on a chart. But that's one of those things that will help you throughout your career, regardless of what you do. And but you don't have to know that level of detail. And in some cases, if it's giving you a problem, just don't do it. Just study everything else. Because if you miss the two subnetting questions you get, you're still going to pass if you know everything else. It's probably not the best advice. Don't study something. Kind of advice is that? But that's, if you have to choose, don't study that one. How you like that? Okay. Get a hot beverage. A lot of wireless questions. I hit a couple of those in the Q&A that we did this month. There were a number of Windows 7 questions in here, and I can't help with Windows 7 questions. I'm so sorry. Not on this one. We could if we're doing the A+. So tune in next month for the A+ exam. Is there any logic behind common port numbers, and what would make that I could use to make it easier to remember, or is it all just memorization? It's all just memorization. There's not a logical layout for these port numbers. Now, the good part is that when you start using them, especially using them in a firewalling or filtering perspective, you tend to learn them just off the top of your head. Port 80 is HTTP and port 443 is HTTPS. And I know that because I set up a firewall that blocked those particular port numbers or allowed those particular port numbers. And so you start associating the port numbers with the application. So it might help you even to go into those applications to see what port numbers they're using. Sometimes they'll give you the option to change the port number, and you can look at the default. And that might give you a way to synchronize in your mind a port number with the way a particular application is working. And that may be a good way to do it. But that is one of those things that's just memorization. But it's also one of those things that when you start working with it is just something that's common. So like driving a car. Nobody opens up the manual every time they get in the car to figure out how to start it up. You just memorize it. Put the key in here, you turn it. You don't even think about it anymore. You're just doing it. It's all muscle memory. The easy part is making that happen. But when you started, that was hard. Okay, what do I do first? Okay, key. All right, do I push the brake? What do I do here? Okay. Do I push the clutch in? I don't know. But now it's just automatic. So it's a similar thing with the port numbers. You start working with it, they make sense. And they're important things to know, especially in networking, especially in security. Know your port numbers. Pretty important. What certifications do I recommend if I'd like a job doing site surveys? I don't know that there is a specific certification along the site survey, but it sounds like to me, if it's a very broad site survey, just a general technology. In fact, the Network Plus, Security Plus, A+. Those are good technologies to know about, good certifications to have, because site surveys involve everything from heating and cooling, equipment that's in a rack, networking. There's a wireless function to it. There's a lot there. There's no specific surveys around that. There might be some, I don't know, on the Cisco side, maybe not. Certainly might be part of site surveys or on the Security Plus. They might be on the Network Plus as well. Trying to think back, but it's just a single topic. So it's not really a certification around it. There may be, if there is a set of software you're using, there may be a company that has their own. But that's another one of those very niche jobs that doesn't necessarily correlate back to a specific certification. It's not something you commonly do. It's something that's commonly done for you by a third party, and they might have someone who does that a lot, but probably not 100% of the time. That'd be something nice to have, though, wouldn't it? Have somebody just do a site survey every 6 months, especially of your wireless network. It'd be very simple to have that there. Let's go to another question. In the chat room, any questions, any thoughts on the new Linux Plus exams? I have looked at them. I've looked at the objectives. And yes, they do recommend, they recommend A+, they recommend Network Plus, they recommend, I think it is 12 months of Linux administration, and you probably should. The Linux Plus exams are difficult exams. They are CompTIA certifications, but CompTIA is actually licensing them from a company called LPI. They're actually an LPI exam that CompTIA is taking verbatim and plopping it on their website and going, it's CompTIA exam. That's why it says CompTIA powered by LPI. The LPI piece, or the LPI company, make a difficult exam, and you do need to know a lot about Linux. You need to understand almost every aspect of the operating system to pass both of those exams. And they just updated them, the 103, 104. And they didn't change a lot, though. Wasn't a lot of difference between the old and the new. So if you studied for the old one, you'll probably do fine on the new one, because they're so comprehensive. You have to know so much to get through those exams that I think it's more of the same. I didn't see any dramatic difference between the old and the new. I just saw it was a minor update. It didn't even look like they changed much with the structure either. I didn't go into details. I didn't do a one-to-one mapping. I just flipped through it. But that's true. So a good point is that if you take the Linux Plus exams and you pass it and you get the certification, you also get the LPI cert as well. So that's something that's a useful thing to have. I don't think it's an adaptive exam, unless he changed it recently. I don't recall that it is. How many people do adaptive exams anymore? There's a few out there. Cisco, I think, still doing some level of that. It's not a lot of companies still doing those. Let's keep going with the questions. So I've got some time. My voice is holding out. And I'm just going to be working on things anyway after this. So how many questions on the test? How long does the test usually take? This is a common question, interestingly enough. If you go out to the CompTIA website, they detail for you both the N10 005 and the 006. They tell you how many questions. They tell you how long it should take. They tell you the type of questions. They have a video that describes to you the type of questions you will get. Very useful to have that as well. So they step you through the fill in the blank, matching, multiple choice, all of the different types of performance-based questions you can expect to see, which I think is really nice to have that there. I don't have time to do a network address translation overview, but how it is applied in the real world is many and varied. Network address translation, the most common example of it is when you're on the inside of your network and you're translating your internal networks into a public address that can then be used to communicate out to Google and Facebook and other devices out on the internet. Practically every organization, all of your home routers, that's what they're doing, is they are doing source NAT. They're taking the source address, their network address, translating the source to a public address and sending that on its way so that it can then find its way back where the process is reversed and sent down to your machine. That is the most common network address translation. But if you have devices, especially in a large organization, you have web servers and database servers that need to be made available to the outside, it's common to create an internal network address translation so that people coming inbound to you can have that destination translated down to that end user device or that server device at the destination IP level. So that's a destination NAT. There's other interesting things to do with NAT. There's, for instance, a type of NAT called a U-turn NAT that comes in handy, especially when working with perhaps even internal servers where you go out to a firewall or a router and it NATs you back to the inside. It's kind of a hairpin or a U-turn. Comes in handy. And there's other things you can do with NAT to get you around problems. If somebody was to move a server without telling you, and the address, this has happened to me, and the address is now, it's now a different subnet, it's a different IP address, and yet everybody in the internet has a different DNS setting for that IP. So you can NAT, instead of everybody coming inbound to the original IP, NAT them to the new IP, and they never know that anything changed. In the meantime, you can fix the DNS to get that all sent out. That never happens. People just move things around without telling you. That's never happened ever in the history of anything, has it? Are VLANs safe from things like packet sniffing from adjacent VLANs on the same router? Nope. In fact, the VLAN piece, and in fact, the sniffing piece is a bit of a challenge. Getting the packets themselves is really the issue. If you've got access to do protocol analysis on a switch, then you can pretty much choose whatever VLAN you want to look at, any interface you want to look at, and you can look at it. And even on a trunk link, you can break a trunk link and put your analyzer in the middle, and the analyzers are smart enough to look at the .1Q tags and determine what VLAN is going across as the data is going by, and even separates it out for you on the screen so that you can see this went on VLAN 1, this went on VLAN 2, and this went on VLAN 3. It's very useful to have that there. That's so common. And it's an important skill to have, that network analysis and across VLANs, and how you set up the switch to be able to see that traffic, how to have your analyzer view that traffic, that trunked mode traffic. There's a lot of different ways to do that. A lot of firewalls are allowing that now as well, not just switches to have that. Does the test have hands-on, or is it all virtual simulations? It might be hands-on. It might be a simulation. It might be a fill in the blank. It might be a matching question, and it's going to be multiple choice. All of those things. I think that's one of the things I think people now, they're going in the exam and not realizing that there are performance-based questions that I think have been around for a couple of years now. These performance-based questions, they're called, could be dropping you at a command line and telling you to perform a function, or it might be having you take a lot of networking technologies and sort them from highest to lowest, like we did today. Those are performance-based questions. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's a simulation, but it does mean you're going to have to perform some type of function other than multiple choice, certainly. What equipment do I use for my broadcasts? There's, just a couple things. I got, a couple devices here I use for my broadcasts. This is my boat. This has been built over time. This is where I sink all my money. Instead of going out on a boat, I sit in front of this camera. And there's a mix of things. I keep saying that I'm going to do an overview of the studio so you can get a feel for it. But it's effectively, all you need is a camera and a microphone. I have a Heil PR40, which is a broadcast quality microphone. You don't have to have this level microphone to do anything like this, but audio is an important part of what I do. It's the most important part. I do videos. Audio is the most important part of that. It's interesting. The camera is an off-the-shelf, 2-generation-old Canon camera that I just plug in via HDMI, and that's how it ultimately gets to you. Now, the other parts of this are a little above grade. So my audio is done over here on a Radius from a company called Axia, which is again another broadcast quality. This will go in a radio station. they almost didn't want to give it to me. They're like, what are you doing? I don't understand. But I wanted something that I could do some very interesting things with the audio, and it's all IP based. It's a Linux box, effectively, under the surface. That comes in handy. I don't see that, but it's all handled that way. It's a very nice piece of technology. The video switching itself, I used to use some software-based video switching on my desktop. What was that called? I still have it. Let's find it, shall we? I think we shall. What was it called? Wirecast. So I used Wirecast, which is software-based, relatively inexpensive, couple $100, and you're running with that. You can plug a camera in, have your mic, plug it all into one computer, and broadcast on Wirecast, and you're good to go. And I used to do everything that way. Now I took that piece of it and I separated it out into this piece here, which is a video switching server. So this is separate hardware that does video switching. So I can plug in a lot of cameras, tell them what to do, put the lower thirds up. It's a little more detailed there, but it gives me a lot of flexibility. It's also doing the streaming. So I click a button, it streams. I click a button, it records it. I click a button, and it shifts the camera like that. So it provides me a little more flexibility for the pieces, for those pieces. Yes, well, the rotating red lights here is a video recording. I'm recording both the live video and what's on standby simultaneously onto these in case something happens to YouTube or I lose the connection to the net. Later on, I can upload that version. And I'm not only recording this, I'm recording on the TriCaster as well, my video switcher, so that will work as well. Wirecast is not in the same family as Shoutcast or Icecast, just has cast at the end. Wirecast is Telestream. That's the company that makes it from those pieces. And that's basically it. You know, there's lights and everything is networked together. Everything I have in here is on the network. There's some post processing that I do to the audio. There is, but that's basically it. The studio is soundproofed. I have a special soundproofing. It's a standalone studio, but it's at my house, so I'm close by, and it is soundproofed with a foam insulation. So it's very quiet in here. I also have carpet. I don't know if you can see that here. I guess you can. There's carpet on the floor. Around the sides of the room is all drapes, except for behind me, obviously. It's all drapes there, so the room is dead. Relatively dead. You know, there's obviously a lot of equipment here. There's a desk that's hard. There's, you know, flat screens in front of me. But the room is effectively dead. People will walk in and say, it's so quiet in here, because when you're talking, there's no echoing or reflection of the audio. And that allows me to also, with this mic, the PR40 is a dynamic mic that allows me to you have to really get close to it to really get the best kind of audio out of it. And it is very centered on the very front of the mic. If you are behind the mic, you really don't have a very good way to hear what's going on. So a lot of noise that it could even happen outside of this in the room, you don't even hear, because this mic is so good. That's another good reason I got the mic. There is the TriCaster video switcher is running Windows 7, interestingly enough. Windows 7. And it runs great. It's really a piece of hardware. That's where the real key is with the hardware itself. And that's why I use that particular, and that's a very well-known and very solid technology for me. I love the TriCaster for those pieces. The cameras are not pan, tilt, zoom, because they don't have to be. It's just me. There's nobody else here. It's not like there's different things to look at. The security system I use here does have pan, tilt, zoom, but that's a little different for those pieces. For those. Some folks asking for the objectives. The course objectives is at professormesser.com/objectives, or go out to Google and just type CompTIA exam objectives. It takes you to the CompTIA site for those. The thing running Linux is my audio system. that's to my left here with the lights going back and forth there. Behind the scenes, it's running Linux. I never see the Linux, but it is a Linux device. So in this room, literally to make this work, I'm running Mac OS X, Windows, and Linux all working together. How you like that? Can't send me emails now. I mean, you can, and you do, but not about that. Can't really fight with me about operating systems. I like all of them. Well, argument's over. Sorry about that. Someone was nice enough to call, so let's at least talk to them. That would be nice, wouldn't it? The 949 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
Hey, Professor. This is Justin. I'm actually in your chat room.
Hey, Justin. Thanks for calling.
Yeah. I noticed you had kind of a lack of callers this morning, but
You'll notice it doesn't stop me from talking.
No, that's right. No, that's good though. That's excellent. No, I was calling because I kind of wanted to get your view on one or two things, and I wanted to share something with the people that are left in the chat room. I found, and I know we've talked about this before, but how to prepare for the exam and what you need. And your site does an amazing job of sort of breaking that down. But I also found something at the MIT website, the web.mit.edu or .edu, and it talks about mastering tests, and it's sort of become, in combination with your information on the exams preparation, it's sort of become like my holy Bible of test taking or exam preparation. And to sort of break it down real quick, because I know you're kind of like out of time here, but to break it down quick, it goes like this. It says start early, and that's huge for the exams, I think, because these things are time dated, right? They expire.
Right.
And then find out how much time you can dedicate for study. That was a big one for me. Like, look at your work, your family schedule. And the way I've got it broken down is I do about an hour a night during the week, and then on the weekends I break it down like maybe 3 hours on Saturday, 3 hours on Sunday. Whatever you can do is huge. And then it says prioritize your time, obviously. Focus on the areas. The big point of that is focus on the areas that you're weakest in. And actually, before I go on, I am posting the link in the chat room for this.
And we're looking at it online as you're talking as well. This is a great resource.
Good. Yeah, so I fell in love with this, and anytime anyone asks me, the first thing I do is I point them to your site, and then I tell them to go to this site and take a look at this. But and then after the prioritize is choose your study style, and that's kind of a difficult one. You kind of have to know. You and I think have talked about it before, but you kind of have to understand how you learn, and that's really Is it reading? Is it? I know hands-on is for me the big one, but. And then stick to your plan. That's the end of the MIT version.
That sounds so easy.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Just stick to your plan. Everything will work out. There's never any distractions or anything in
right,
life, so
of course
don't worry about that. But then there was the thing I wanted to get your view on is there were a few extras that I wanted to add to this, and that is the one thing that really helped me was really just building up the confidence and scheduling the exam. Because once you have, I found for myself, once I had the exam scheduled and there was a date in mind, that I really started studying.
Yeah, it's real at that point, isn't it?
Right, exactly.
Yep.
And of course, MIT is not going to tell you that, because if you're going to MIT, your exams are scheduled.
That's
so
right.
You don't need to really worry about that. And then, and so then and then the other thing is, if you're clueless as to what to expect on the exam, I have found, and even though, yes, it does cost a little bit of money, but don't be afraid to go take the exam. If anything, just to kind of understand what to expect on the exam. I, in fact, did do that, and I didn't pass, unfortunately, but after that, I knew really what to expect. And I know that we're not exactly allowed too much to talk about, because you do sign a non-disclosure deal.
Right.
But that was another big one for me, was actually just getting it scheduled and going and taking it was like this. It was almost like a weight off my shoulders, and just to know what was out there.
It's actually a good idea, maybe even a better idea, and people should take advantage of this. Maybe they don't even realize, but if you're in school and your school is part of the CompTIA academic program, you get your tests for a huge discount. So obviously taking the test is going to cost you money every time. If you're already in school, that may be a great way to do this, is spend the money because it's relatively cheap compared to someone who's not in that program. Take it now, take it first thing, and do exactly what you said. Get a feel for it so that at least that set of anxiety has now been put to the side.
Yeah, because I mean, I noticed that you get asked that a lot.
Yeah.
What's on the exam? What do I expect? And it's like you want to tell them, but you can't. You know, you'd like to tell them exactly what there is, but you can't really disclose too much. And I get that. And there's a reason for that. They don't want, they want everybody to have a different experience, and they don't want people cheating, obviously, on the exam. It's totally, defeats the whole purpose if you obviously, But, yeah, I've been going through this, and I have to, I really had to read this a couple of times and let it really sink in, but it has become like, my 1, 2, 3 checklist on what I'm doing and preparing for an exam. And I have a friend, for example, who is trying to get into IT, and he was told by his job that he's basically got the position, but they need him to get the Network Plus certification first. So, and that seemed strange to me. They don't even want him to have the A+. They just want him to have the Network Plus. I guess that's not strange, but it just seemed, like a jump.
Okay,
like,
sure.
He doesn't have any, but he's got this idea in his head that he's going to be able to do it in like 3 or 4 weeks, and maybe he can. He does have some experience, but not much. And I feel like, I've told him, I'm like, the chances of you going in and being able to immediately pass that exam your first time out after about 4 weeks of study, depending on how hard you study, I guess, but is slim, at least in my view.
That's going to be tight.
Yeah, I mean, people can do it, but
sure.
That's really cutting it close. And, of course, I've pointed him to you. I've pointed him to the exam cram books, which are great.
Those are good.
And you always talk about definitely have something else. Don't just depend on the videos.
That's right.
And only one source. You don't want to do that. And I think that would be another point to put in this little list. But yeah, he really needs to sort of get an understanding of what it means to study for one of these exams, because they don't make it easy, and nor should they, really. I mean, but yeah. So anyway,
I love the MIT stuff. I'm already Instapapered it, and when we're done with the study group, I'm tweeting that one out so it's in my stream so people can find that. I think that's the best, this very straightforward way of how should I study for this? When do I know I'm ready to take the exam? How do I make the most of all of these study materials? They've already laid it all out at MIT.
Yeah, I think it's amazing.
That's fantastic.
I think it's amazing. But yeah, I think people just remember, though, this is for MIT students, so the whole scheduling the exam thing needs to be kind of added in there, I think. But other than that, yeah, it's become my sort of holy Bible, along with the exam objectives. If you can, and that's the other thing, is once you look at those objectives, if you can go down the line and you know what everything means, you have an understanding of what each thing is and what it means, you should be okay.
Yep.
I think is the general rule. But
I agree.
Anyway,
so before your associate, have them do the checklist, go all the way down, see how many things you know, and he'll know whether he's ready to go take that exam or not.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And I think, because I haven't heard from him yet, I don't think he knows it all yet. So I think that was kind of a shock to the system when he looked at that. But we'll see. We'll find out. But I also wanted to say I did pass my A+, and your videos were a huge part of that.
Excellent. Congratulations.
I did want to thank you for that. That was huge. So, but thank you again, Professor. And I know I speak for everybody that's in the chat room and everybody that comes to your site. It's just a huge, huge resource.
Thanks so much. I appreciate that. And thanks for the link. I'm going to share that with everyone else as well today.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. I'm glad to hear that.
Thanks for calling. We'll talk to you on the next one.
Yeah, you bet.
See you in the chat room.
All right. Bye.
There's, I love this link from MIT. It's probably one of the top 3 questions I get on the website is, how do I study for this thing now? How do I go through the exam list? Do I get a book? How do I set aside time to do it? And they just laid it all out. It's sort of just flipping through this are some fantastic things. A lot of it's already been done for you because at MIT, it's, define the challenge you have with taking the exam. And you already know how much time it is going to be for the exam and how many things to do with that. But the other piece is about how to study. How do I put together a study plan so well broken out for you on that MIT website? And I'll send out I'll tweet that after we're done. So everybody has it and it'll be in my stream and I can have it there forever so I don't lose those things. I have run out of time. We are now 2 hours and 10 minutes into this, and I think we managed to get through a lot of questions today. I have so many more I wish I could have gotten through, and I just did not have the time. But I'll certainly have those sitting aside. I'll make new questions for next month. And just before we finish up, let me make sure if you go out to the Professor Messer website, there is the calendar, and that calendar will show you when the next study group is. Today is the 20th in July. The next Network Plus study group is going to be on Wednesday, the 22nd. So it's a Wednesday for next month's study group. Just a little programming note for everybody so that you know that we're going to be doing this on a different day. I don't know how great that's going to be, but I'll be here. I'll answer the questions. If nobody else is, we'll at least get that done. Still the same time. It'll be 12 noon, but it'll be on that Wednesday in July. I hope to see you then. Thanks for joining us again today. Thanks for the after show and for the calls and for the comments in the chat room. And of course, we'll see you all the time on the Professor Messer website. The chat's there 24/7. There's always somebody, me or somebody, who's there to help answer your questions. Best of luck with your exams. Best of luck with your studies. We'll see you next time on the study group. Thanks, everyone.